to the social media derby. We've got a very interesting episode, but probably not one of our longer ones, which I'm sure everyone's who's listened is probably happy about. We've thrown in a couple of hour and a half, hour and 45 minute, almost 2 hour episodes. So there's not that much to talk about this week, isn't there, Johns? How are you feeling though? I know you're feeling a little bit rough.
Yeah, I think it's my turn this week to be a little bit hungover. So yeah, we'll keep it short. But yeah, there's some interesting topics to talk about, particularly with what happened yesterday.
Yeah, we will. We'll keep that brief though, because this is not a Man City pod. And sorry, Johns, ahead of time, but them. But yeah, we'll talk about yesterday because there's been a really interesting debate which has been going on around it, kind of before it, during the game, afterwards, around kind of the treble winning achievement, comparing it with going invincible, which is obviously Arsenal's biggest achievement. Then there's obviously been convos around which treble winner was better. A lot of people saying City's treble winning team was better. Obviously, Jamie Carragher's the biggest cheerleader for that particular argument. But yeah, we'll get into it first, Johns. I did watch the match, but I was kind of in and out. I was at a friend's daughter's birthday party. So what did you think of the match? Because I know you went out with the lads and watched it.
Yeah, I mean it was his typical final, really, wasn't it? It's super cagey. It's funny because we watched like the West Ham in the Europa Conference League, what, a few days before that, and then you had a very similar type final. It was both kind of not great football played, very cagey, a lot of mistakes being made on both sides, no like wonderful play. In general, I think it was a competitive game though. You know, a lot of people were trying to write off Inter and saying, you know, City are going to bulldoze them and whatever else because of what they did to Bayern and Real. But no, I think it was a really competitive game. Inter played decently well. Like they kind of nullified City's attack quite well. Didn't help that De Bruyne had to come off early as well, getting injured again. I think second time in a row now in uh, Champions League finals that's happened. But I think, you know, City were making a lot of unforced errors. Like there was some stuff from Akanji, some stuff from Edison. There were just a lot of errors happening. And I think it could have been caused by the way that Inter defended, the way that they were kind of like pressing really high up the pitch and putting pressure on people like Rodri. You see people like Rodri, they rarely make mistakes, but they were making mistakes yesterday, right? So I think it was partly down to Inter's game plan and then partly down to just the occasion. So I think, yeah, it was a cagey game. I think obviously Inter had chances. I mean, like right at the end, obviously, you know, me and all the lads were cussing up Lukaku because of what he was doing, getting in the way of DeMarco's headers and missing kind of open goals or at least putting it down right down the middle for Edison. So it wasn't a great game. But it's kind of what you come to expect from a final, and particularly a final where you've got a team like Inter who, you know how to defend and make a game a bit ugly.
Yeah, it was. I looked. Obviously, there was some like infographics and stats going around on Insta and Twitter and stuff today, and it seems like at least the last 3 or 4 Champions League finals have all been won 1-0. So pretty much, you score a goal and you win. Um, and there were like varying levels. Obviously, you had competitive ones, and then you had ones where you had a clear favourite. Like obviously, City were clear favourites in this one, but it was still really competitive. And yeah, like I said, I watched a bit of it, and then I tried to watch a bit of it again on the train home, and I managed to catch typical timing. I managed to catch Rodri's goal. I managed to catch DeMarco hitting the bar, and then Lukaku managing to get his massive frame in the way of his own teammate and be the first line of defence for City. So that was fun. And then, yeah, I actually managed to catch him miss the header as well. So that was beautiful. And then my internet went out and I was back to just hoping that Inter somehow scored. But no, it looked like Inter kind of did their own Italian version of kind of the heavy metal kind of gegenpressing type situation that normally Klopp employs when he plays against them, and it's been obviously really effective. And I think Pochettino's Spurs as well had a similar style against City, which in times gone by has worked really well. So yeah, it looked like there was a bit of hope, but like you said, because it was a combination of City making mistakes and then Inter kind of looking like even like better than I guess we had expected. But they are a cup team. Like they've done really well in cups in the last couple of seasons under Inzaghi. So I think people were probably being a little bit unfair to write them off completely. But yeah, unfortunately, Rodri turned up. Bit of a big game player, to be fair, in the Champions League this season for them. He's done it against Bayern with a screamer, and then he did it with a great goal in this final. And yeah, just one team who you can tell, even though they were really nervy, still were, they had cojones, as Troy Deeney said, ultimately, and Inter didn't seem to be, up to it in the big clutch moments, which is a shame. And yeah, City are treble winners. So obviously that brings us to our main talking point with regards to that result, because we're going to move swiftly on from City's win. But the whole chat around whether being a treble winner is a better, or I know you brought up before we recorded, a harder achievement than going invincible. And obviously there's been a lot of chat around this City team being a lot better, much better, or whatever the phraseology that's been used than the '99 United team, which I find it's really interesting when you do these generational debates, because you're never going to get an answer. It's very different than if we say this treble winning team was better than a treble winning team that won last year or 2 years or even 5 years ago. But if we go back 20 plus years, the game's changed so much. You'd have a 4-4-2 against this whatever Pep's playing, a 3-2-4-1 or whatever he's playing. It wouldn't happen, would it? So those teams wouldn't even be able to play against each other and function. So I did argue before we started recording that I'm not going to commit that this team was better than the United team, but I would say that United team is probably not the best United team that I've seen. I think our 07-08 Champions League and Premier League double winning team with Rio and Ronaldo and Tevez and Rooney and Scholes, Carrick, Hargreaves and all those guys, Vidic, was probably a better team than our 99 team. And if I think that team would stand a really good chance against this generation of City teams. But I would even argue that this current City team, even though they're really ruthless and kind of almost robotic, they're probably not the best City team I think of. I think of that Aguero, Yaya Toure, Silva, Company City team, and just think some of the football they were playing, and even though they didn't win a treble, win a Champions League, some of their football and their achievements felt, I don't know, they just felt better. But I don't know, I'd be interested to get your take. Obviously, Arsenal fan first, about the treble, and whether you think the Invincibles is a bigger achievement or better achievement.
Yeah, I think on the first topic of kind of like the whole treble and which team's better and so on, I think it needs to be a more nuanced argument. I think if we look at this City team this season, I think we can all comfortably kind of see when we look around the world, some teams are having fall-offs, right? Some historically really great European teams have fallen off quite significantly from where they've been previously, right? So I think if I look at world football today and I look at who do I think is the best team, like genuinely speaking, if you put them in like a league altogether, something like the Super League, who do I think would win it? I think City would win it. I think they are, in my opinion, the most dominant team that we have today. And I think that's really the difference in the argument, is that I think the Man United treble winners, like you say, are probably not even the best team you guys have had. But I think they weren't as dominant at that time. So it wasn't as clear cut to say, oh, Man United in a league with all the rest of the teams around them, in a Super League style kind of league, would win it. And I think that's what makes, to me, the Man United treble more impressive, that you weren't actually, I don't think you were actually favourites to do that, particularly like the European Cup, right? You kind of squeaky bummed that through the Champions League at that point. So I think the City team is more dominant, and I think they would, like, apples to apples, if you can try and do it, they are probably a better man-for-man team than your team today. But I think your treble was more impressive because of the fact that you kind of came from maybe slightly lower odds to do it. And you also did it with less resources at your disposal. You did it with a very homegrown team. So if I'm talking about which is a more impressive achievement, I think your treble is much better than theirs. If I'm thinking who, like, again, apples to apples, if you can, who would win in a match or who is a better team, I'd probably say City. But then again, the dominance that City have shown, is it just because a lot of teams like Barca and Real Madrid aren't having their best season? Barca are in the mud. Bayern don't look great. Italian football is, nowhere near as competitive with the rest of the world as it used to be. Man United, all of these like historically really good, high performing like teams in Europe are not doing well. Look at Liverpool, right? They've had a terrible season this season as well by their standards. So I think in that regard, you can maybe cast some shadow, like some doubt on what City have done this season, because it's like, did they beat the best of everyone else around them? Like Barca again. Think about all these other teams; they're not at their best. So that kind of maybe puts more of a negative light on it. I don't know if you agree with that, but that's kind of the way that I see it.
Yeah, no, I actually do agree with a lot of your points. I think the United treble is definitely more impressive for the reasons that you said. Like a third, if not more, than our starting 11 was homegrown, came through our academy. Um, but it's hard to compare when you talk about we didn't spend as much money, or like it's all inflation. Like if you take that into account, we probably did spend as much. I think it was obviously more organic because of the academy players and because of the way we got our money and the fact that we were a good team historically, and then that team was actually a very good team as well, and that there was a lot of buzz around the fact that United should be getting close to winning the Champions League. We were within the crop of best teams in Europe for sure. Like it was us, it was you had entered the fray with Wenger's kind of renaissance, bringing Arsenal back to the top of European football. You had obviously Italian teams were the best; they were cream of the crop at the time. Juventus, Inter were the best two at the time. AC Milan, obviously. Then you had Real and Barca, and Bayern Munich. So if you think about it, I think those teams were all much, much better than the current crop of those teams compared to City. Um, Obviously, City have recently had Liverpool, and Liverpool weren't really in that conversation at that time. So Liverpool have kind of been the closest thing to a juggernaut to actually compete with them. So that's why, I don't know, I don't think it's as impressive when I think of their route to get through. Like the best team they played was Real Madrid, really. I mean, well, I don't know if you can even say that because they played Bayern Munich, who've been in turmoil this season, no striker. Real Madrid have looked like I think they look quite different from last season. If you look at a lot of their results, they weren't looking as impressive. Even last season when they won it, I think they relied on like the spirit of Puskas and all of their legends to try and suck the ball in at certain times. Also, I don't think that they were necessarily the best team last season to win the Champions League. I think actually Liverpool or City were probably the two best teams at that time. So I think competitive nature wise, I think City have had kind of a bit of a smooth sailing to this, and there's a little bit of fortune when it comes to not really having many teams to fight with them. But that's not really their fault, is it? So, you've got to still win it. So, you've got to give them respect for that. But I think our team was definitely, it was more impressive because of the route we had to. I think we had Barcelona in the group stages, and that was back when the Champions League had two sets of two sets of group stages instead of a round of 16. So I think we had Barca, and then the second group stage we had someone else who was really, really tough. And then the route through in the knockouts was as hard as you can get. We had Barca, I think we had Juventus in the semis, and we obviously had Bayern in the final. So yeah, it's a hard one, but obviously I'm quite biased. I don't think it's as clear cut. And I think when you have such a big time gap between these two teams, like, yeah, of course, any newer team probably would slap up a team from 25,
Yeah,
30 years ago.
that's what that's what's
a given.
supposed to happen, right? Like
Yeah.
you look at 100 years ago versus today, the players it has to be better now. You've got better resources, better training, better fitness, all this other stuff. So I think
It's kind of a moot point, isn't it?
Exactly.
Who's better than who? Like, of course, the newer team should be better than the older team, but I think you should look at it in terms of what's a greater achievement, and then look at things around it. Like we had you guys pushing us non-stop in the league, went to the final game of the season. We had you guys again in the semi-final replay. Back then there was replays in the semi-finals. We, everyone knows the famous Schmeichel save from the pen from Bergkamp, and then Giggs, chucking his shirt around with his big baboon chest out. We won't talk too much about Giggs. And then, Champions League. Everyone remembers the, Solskjaer's won it at the end. famous lines at the end of that at the end of that final. So I think we can probably draw a line under that one and shut Carragher up and all them knobs who are saying stuff around that. It's kind of a silly discussion, isn't it? Like I would probably say this Liverpool team that had hardly achieved anything is probably a better team than our '99 team if you look at recency bias, but also like how the game has moved on. So I think it's not the best way to kind of um, determine who's better. I think it's a bit of a silly one, but yeah. I also think there's a little bit of and I've seen it creep into not only Arsenal fans, but some United fans post losing the cup final. It's kind of a bit of a coping mechanism for a lot of rival fans to kind of just say, like, oh, the City team is unbeatable. Like, they're so good. They're the best team ever. That's why we didn't win the league, or that's why we didn't beat them in the FA Cup final. And I think we have to look at it like, personally, maybe you disagree, Johns, but I think it is circumstantial. And it is, obviously, there's a lot of things around City being so good. But like I said, I think there may have been a better City team. And ultimately, I think it's more of the onus should be on us, not on City being so good. Arsenal could have done something about it in the league. We could have done something about it in the FA Cup final. And ultimately, someone in the Champions League better than Inter, or even Inter, could have done something about it when they played City as well. Because City have lost to us. They've lost to Spurs. They've lost to Liverpool. They've lost to Brentford, home and away. They're beatable. I know they, at the back end of the season when it gets real clutch, they show, again, to Chuck Troy Deeney's phrase, in their cojones. But I do think this isn't an unbeatable, unpenetrable team. And I think a lot of people are using that narrative to kind of make themselves feel a bit better. But, I guess whatever helps people sleep at night. I'm not using that when I think about us in the FA Cup final. I'm still pissed. I'll try and keep the swearing. I'm draw the line on the swearing now, but I'm still annoyed at it because I feel like we had a chance. And I feel like Inter had a chance, even though they didn't have, loads and loads of chances in the actual game. There were ones we've talked about where they could have done something about it. So that's what leaves a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. But let's get to the actual Invincibles comparison now. What do you think is a better achievement, Johns?
Again, I think if it's a better achievement, a more impressive achievement, something that actually means something, if I could swap the Invincibles for a treble, I would do it every day of the week. So obviously winning a treble is, in my mind, a more impressive achievement than going invincible for a season, just because of the fact that going invincible for a season doesn't get you a trophy. It's like the Harry Kane beating Alan Shearer's record. If I'm Harry Kane, which one do I want? Do I want to get a Premier League or get some trophies, or do I want to get the record? And I think Harry Kane, as a team sport, should be wanting to get the trophies. So I think for the Invincible season versus the treble win, I'd take a treble win every day of the week. So in terms of like what's more impressive, which would I prefer? What's a better thing to have in your club's history? I think a treble is better. In terms of what do I think won't be broken for a lot longer, and what do I think is maybe less likely or possible, you might want to equate it to harder. I think the Invincibles is harder or less likely to happen again. And the reason I say that is just because, every team goes into every match wanting to win, right? Their goal in every single match is to win. And a lot of teams, very good teams, have tried to do that over the years, and yet they still always lose a handful of games, right? Even the teams that we're talking about in terms of treble winning United or treble winning City, they're really, really dominant, great teams, and they went into every game trying to win it. And at least with this City team, a lot of depth to be able to deal with these kinds of issues, and they still could not do the invincible season, right? Or however many undefeated games that we did. So yeah, I think what's better, a treble. What is less likely to happen again? I think, an unbeaten invincible season is just less likely to happen again, particularly also because of the fact that, the way that the game is played today, we favor more towards attacking. And I've said this on so many pods, and I'll say it again. Today's day and age is not an easy time to be a defender. So much is expected from you in terms of attacking and in terms of being able to do this, that, and the other on the ball. And you're expected to try things that you were never really expected to try back in those days, right? I know that Arsenal were a pretty free-flowing team, and, we had good ball playing defenders, but the expectation was never that high, and you were never in those risky situations. I remember growing up when coaches would always tell you, don't push up too high in the pitch. They would tell you, stay relatively deep, goal side of your man all the time, right? They were never telling you to get that far up the pitch because they know one-on-one, I'm probably going to get beaten in a race with a striker. So I think that also lends itself to Invincible season being just a lot more difficult to do these days, because players like teams like City, who are, let's say, the most dominant today, teams like Liverpool, again, like last season and kind of the recent years of them, they're risky, defensively risky teams. They're trying things that they maybe shouldn't be trying, like back in those days. So that lends itself to getting caught out every now and then, and that lends itself to losing and to drawing and, you know, whatever else. Whereas I think that Arsenal season, we had a lot of draws. We had a lot of like sneaky little 1-0s here and there, you know, really good defense to just keep us solid. And so, yeah, I don't think it will happen again unless there's like a massive trend or change in the way that football is played. I just don't see that happening either, because I think the game is more, possibly a bit more entertaining now with that attacking style of football. What do you reckon?
No, I actually agree with you. Probably about, I don't know, my maths is not great at the moment, but maybe like 95%, I'd say, because I do think when you're talking about like this day and age of football, 100% agree with you. All the value is on scoring goals. Also, all the value and the emphasis we're putting on even a goalie, let alone a centre backs, is on how they are with their feet. So how they can, you know, effectively start attacks from the back as an 11th man, 11th on-field player. So I agree with you completely. Unless we see a seismic shift in the way that football is played, and a next great like visionary manager who comes in and somehow makes defending sexy, I don't think we're going to have, you know, the kind of the conditions and the circumstances around how football is played in Europe to be able to, you know, support a team going unbeaten in the league. I also think it's completely circumstantial, isn't it? Because we were talking about this off camera, and teams don't really think about going unbeaten in the league until they're 2/3, if not further along the way without losing. So that recent Liverpool team that only lost once in the league, and I think it was away at Watford, if I'm not right. Big up Alan Lau from Frank Sue Foundation. They lost once in the league, and they only started talking about it when they, you know, kind of got past 20 odd games, because for Liverpool, their biggest focus was winning the league. I guess they hadn't won it for 30 years. So it's a lot of things around it, a lot of things at play. And I think we talked again off camera about how Wenger had talked about, Arsene Wenger had mentioned a team could go unbeaten really soon. And he, you know, talked about how Arsenal could potentially do that. So I think it was one of those kind of things where it's a bit of a wacky professor kind of dream list wish thing that Arsene Wenger wanted to go on unbeaten. And like it was like a genuine target for him earlier than, you know, the 2/3 of the way in the season. But it only became realistic 2/3 in the way. You lost in a couple of cups, you've gone out on other things, and therefore you were actually able to throw the kitchen sink at it and actually try and do it. So I agree with you in terms of the likelihood of it happening, low. That's why you said off camera as well that, you know, the bookies are going to put the odds for that through the roof, because, you know, people aren't valuing it the same way Wenger did at the time. And unless suddenly Pep maybe goes, oh, you know, they win the quadruple next year and he's literally got nothing else to achieve, and he just goes, you know what, I want to match that achievement and I want to get higher points scored than Arsenal did and whatever, and he just like suddenly sets his sights on it, I don't see that happening in England. Honestly, I just don't think it's possible. I do see City, for example, winning a treble again, or I do see, you know, an up and coming Arsenal team with all these young players becoming superstars potentially doing it, or Man United in a rebuild doing it, or, you know, maybe if Klopp can rebuild Liverpool with a new core, maybe they can do it. But I still think the chances are really low on that too. But I think the chances are probably slightly higher, if not quite substantially higher, than going unbeaten. Just because, like you said, getting the gold trophy is beautiful. It looks lovely, you know, but I don't know if people really care about that. I think you care about it after you get it. Like when I see Arsenal fans talk about it on social media, whatever, like they're obviously trying to big up the Invincible achievement because it's what you have. But ultimately, I probably beforehand less supporters, less coaches, less players really give two shits about that. To be honest, they probably want to win as many trophies as possible, and it's one of those things that comes in afterwards. But nah, that's a really good chat, man. I think it's good to have that conversation without it being super. Oh, Treble's better, Invincibles are better, because ultimately, I do think it's a bit of a no-brainer. You want to win as many trophies as you can, I think, and as a fan, you want to see your players lift as many trophies as you can. You don't get extra medals for having an
Yeah, and
unbeaten season.
it's a Premier League achievement. So again, like it's very difficult when you talk about really good teams to just talk about like, oh, how good were they in one specific competition? And obviously teams are playing multiple competitions a year. So I think if you look at like, all right, best PL team, yeah, you can put it up there with that. But when you talk about the best team ever type stuff, and when you get into these kinds of conversations, winning a treble or winning, Europe, something in European football lends itself to that. And at the end of the day, I don't want Arsenal to be considered, oh, best PL team ever. I want them to be considered the best team ever. You know what I mean? So you need to be able to do more outside of just that. And if it would be different if we went invincible and won a double, or went invincible and won a treble, then it's like, yo, this is a better treble than yours. Do you see what I'm saying? Because we did this as well. It shows like more dominance and whatever else.
I
But
agree
I
with you,
think,
100%.
and that's where, yeah, like, oh yeah, we and Arsenal fans are going to hate me. They're going to think I'm like a plant or whatever else. But it is our best achievement. And again, not to talk it down, probably no one's going to do it again. Right, until or not going to do it for the foreseeable future. It's not going to happen again. So we can say that we have done something that maybe no one ever will do again. Whereas with the treble, at the time, we probably would have said the same thing. I don't think that's ever going to happen again, and it's happened because football, yeah, teams can be dominant like that. So I think in that regard, I hope Arsenal fans don't hate me for it. But at the end of the day, just ask yourself, lads, would you take a treble over the Invincible? And if we had already won a treble, would you even still be talking about the Invincible when you come into these kinds of conversations against other teams? No, we'd be saying, we won a treble, mate. Invincible would be secondary to that. You see what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
I agree with you. I think it would be, and I'm not downplaying it when I say this, so before people start calling me the op or whatever, right? Like it's a bit of a cherry on top. Like if you were a treble winner and you had gone on a season unbeaten somewhere along the line too, you could say, look, all right, we've both won trebles, but in that time period, we also went unbeaten. So that's another additional point on our scorecard to help us tip the scales in our favour. But I don't really think it is actually, a fair comparison in terms of achievements. But in terms of the difficulty, like you said, will it be like a record? That lasts for a long time. Sure, it will,
Yeah.
and I'm pretty certain we won't see it, broken or equaled in our lifetime. But
Yeah.
I do want to see my team win another treble. I can probably want to, and another team probably will do that again. But I hope it's obviously not the rivals. I wouldn't even care about it if you did it, but not Liverpool. Bloody hell, even City. And I was watching a couple of United social media influencer streams earlier, and it's funny to see them talking about it because a lot of people have kind of described how I'm feeling quite well. In that it's kind of like it's like a really intense irritation, but it's not unbearable. And I feel like if Liverpool had done it, unbearable. Honestly, I'd have to block Kemmel. I'd have to block a couple of our Liverpool supporter friends because I just couldn't see anything they're posting. He's already unbearable some of the time, and they haven't won a treble. But yeah, City it kind of just feels a bit hollow and numb, and I won't go down into that rabbit hole too much. But
I think
yeah,
it
it's
will
been
hurt
fun. It's
more
been
in 20
interesting.
years when you have to talk to all of the fans that started supporting them when they were children now.
Yeah, you're
Because
right.
right now,
No,
like,
you're right.
I was out in London yesterday, didn't see a single City shirt. Saw more Inter fans and more people in Inter shirts, and actually I saw people in Arsenal shirts. More, I know it's London, obviously, so I'm sure it was a different story in Manchester. But I didn't see any of their fans. Didn't have to didn't hear anyone singing. Didn't hear anything. And I know it's a big kind of running joke that they haven't got any fans, right? But really, that's what makes this kind of achievement irritating to deal with as a football fan of a different team, is that I've got to deal with all your fans coming on social media chatting rubbish about how you're the best team ever and whatever else, right? And it's more annoying when you actually have those people in person. And I think with City, I don't know a single City fan, like a proper City fan, like in a personal relationship. I'm sure,
Yeah, me
though,
neither.
10, 15 years, there's going to be some unbearable people that are probably 25 years old and started supporting City when they were 7 or 8 because they were the best team about, right? And they're not from Manchester and whatever else. So I'm sure that will happen in the future. But at this point in time, it's not too rattling for me. Whereas, yeah, if Liverpool won it, and I think even worse, if Chelsea did it, those would be the ones that would rattle me, and then I'd have to get a bit more defensive and turtle shell up. Yeah,
I should have added Chelsea to the list just for your behalf. See, even Chelsea wouldn't rattle me. I really don't mind Chelsea, but obviously there's an Arsenal, Chelsea, London thing, and they kind of rattle you already about the Champions League. So there's kind of a bit of a pre-rattle going on there. But that will put me right back in the Carragher thing. Like they don't like. I know they haven't really got loads of fans, but it's even worse when you're not even one of the fans and you're out doing, you're getting your pom poms out and doing all of that for them. They're a great team, but wait until they get their own fans and let them toot their own horn. You don't need to be doing that for them. But anyway, let's move on swiftly. Let's dig into some transfers. And I think last week on the pod we talked a little bit about some incomings. And I don't think that's really changed. I think we're still kind of going for those same kind of players. So let's focus a bit on the outgoings this time. And let's start with you, Johnson, with Arsenal and the rumours around Kieran Tierney maybe heading to Newcastle. First of all, do you want him gone? Do you want to keep him? What's your opinion on the player and how his future at Arsenal? And what do you feel about if you were to sell him? Would 30 million be enough? Because that's what the rumoured fee is. Would you be able to get someone in? Or like who would you look to get in? What's your general vibe on it?
Yes, I mean, like the first question of do I want to sell him? I think if I want to really look into the situation too much and just to look at his quality and his place in the team and so on, I'd say no, I don't want to sell him. I want to keep him. I think he's a very good, and even then, I don't even consider him to be an alternative to Zinchenko. I know that Zinchenko's been great this season, but I actually, in many cases, would prefer to start Tierney. I like Zinchenko and what he offers to the team, but I feel like that's more of like a more fair battle in that position. I don't feel like it's a clear like A-B, if you get what I mean, right? Like there's no, to me at least, there's not clear cut that Zinchenko needs to be our starting left back in every game. Right? I feel like there's more of an opportunity for him to get in. So in that regard, no, I don't want to sell him. But if I look deeper into the picture and I look probably at what he wants to do, and maybe he's not so, he doesn't really feel like he's settled. It kind of reminds me a little bit of like the Lucas Torreira type thing, where it was like, looked really good for us, played well, had a good heart. He was kind of a maybe not a fan favorite, but you could see him becoming one. I feel like Tierney was in that category. We could all see like, he was wearing shorts in like -degree weather and all kinds of stuff. You know what I mean? So we could see him becoming a fan favorite. But I just feel like he's never really settled at the team, and I know that he's had some mental health battles and stuff like that. So I know that doesn't contribute very well to being able to settle in. But I think from that point of view, it definitely feels like he doesn't want to be here. I feel like if he was willing to be in that rotation and to compete, Arteta wouldn't look to sell him. I think he would look to keep him because he's a great, like I said, he's a great backup if he needs to be a backup, and even possibly just a great competitor in that position. So I think in that regard, I guess it feels like we kind of have to sell him because I think he wants out, and because I think, he's not really happy with the position or the role that he's playing in the team. It's kind of a similar-ish argument to like the Xhaka argument and so many other arguments we've had before, right? Is if that player wants to be number one and we can't offer that to them, the easiest way to keep, harmony in the team is to let him go, unfortunately, right? And I think that's really important to our team right now, is to keep that harmony, to keep that morale at the right level and in the right kind of regard. And I think you saw like Lokonga, right? He got, on the Amazon documentary last year, he was complaining about not getting football, and look at him now. He's been sent out on loan, and I don't know if I see him coming back. So I think from that regard, maybe we kind of do have to shift Tierney. And then I think on the fee, I think 30 is all right. Like for a player that doesn't really play, he doesn't really get that much game time. he hasn't done like crazy outstanding things. He is a defender, right? It's not a high value position, unfortunately, in the transfer market a lot of the times. So I think 30 million we can do. I think we could probably get more out of Newcastle if we really tried, because of the the financial situation they're in, and the fact that they're kind of going to be a competitor to us, right, in the years coming. So in that regard, I think we could rinse them a little bit more. But yeah, I'd be happy with if we sold him for 30. I think we could get a decent-ish alternative type replacement. I don't think we're going to get anyone. I think we'll get someone that like maybe a similar quality to him, but I don't think we will be able to upgrade that position. I don't think we'll be able to upgrade on him for 30 million, right? Unless we get lucky in the transfer market. And I mean, like, if we can do whatever Liverpool did to get bloody McAllister, then maybe we could get an upgrade on that position. But yeah, that's how I see it.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I get where you're coming from. It does feel like there's something more going on in the background when it comes to this particular deal and like all the rumours around him. Because obviously, like you said, in the All or Nothing documentary, he obviously talked about, maybe finding it difficult to be away from his family, struggling with some other mental health issues that are involved in, being in football. And so that might be, a big reason why he wants to move to Newcastle. And to be honest, Prem wise, if he wants to stay in the Prem, you can't go closer to Scotland, really, can you? So that makes sense. I think 30 million. I agree with you. You could get more. When I saw that, I was like, all right, that's fair. It's not a disrespectful number. But when I hear Scott McTominay's going for more than 30 million on our side, I do go a little bit. I know defender, midfielder, but defenders are premium these days, especially fullbacks with the value that a lot of teams place on them. You could see getting more, but I think 30 would probably be fair considering he doesn't play that much. But there's kind of a bit of an interesting aura around Kieran Tierney. I think a lot of Arsenal fans that I hear and listen and speak to still really rate him, and actually some think he's better than Zinchenko. Some think he's like Andy Robertson level, which might be a bit of gas, but put him in those conversations. So when you think about it that way, should a defender of that quality or what people kind of rate go for that amount? Probably not, but logically looking at it, he hasn't played that much football. So if you've got 30 million for rotational player, you'd think that's pretty good business. And
I mean, so on that topic, the other thing about it is that if we didn't want to sell him, we'd get more for him. Do you see what I'm saying, right? Like, when you want to sell a player, you see what I'm saying? If you want to sell a player, if teams know that you're trying to shift someone, you're not in a great selling position. You're not in a great bargaining position. You kind of have to be like, all right. It's like on Football Manager when you've got an unhappy player, you just want to shift them as quick as possible. You don't want to get ripped off, but you're like, all right, hit this mark and I'll sell him. And I think if it were the other way around and he was playing really well and then people were coming after him, yeah, we could probably get, I don't know, 50 million for him.
No, that's a good point, man. I guess it's his stock's low as well as that, right? He hasn't really played that many games. Also, if there's behind the scenes he's being transfer listed, offered around because he's got these issues, then you're right. The buying clubs doesn't have to be geniuses to work out that they don't have to pay over the odds for him. They can probably get a cut price deal. I heard rumours of us maybe looking to flog Sancho as well, and that deal's also taken a big hit comparatively speaking to what we paid for him, and that's because he's been quite similar actually to Kieran Tierney, suffering with mental health issues. It was rumoured anyway, not really playing as much. When he has played, he's probably been even more disappointed than Tierney. So yeah, that makes complete sense. One thing I wanted to throw in there before you made that point actually was one thing Arsenal fans should also probably get prepared for, and I might be wrong, you might just reply to this and say I'm talking out my Danny Mills, but what about Nuno Tavares coming back? I know there was some stuff about him, obviously he got hooked at Forest. There were some dramas around maybe he had fallen out with Arteta. But if you look at William Saliba's redemption arc, we talked about it last week. Big Willie, by the way, going to sign the contract. So we released that episode at the perfect time. Maybe he can come back from what happened. What do you think about that?
The problem with Nuno Tavares to me was the mental side of it, right? Like he looked like he had the physical attributes to be good, if that makes sense, but he just didn't make the right decisions. He kind of has that like bozo gene in him that kind of maybe like, for example, Kanate has in him sometimes as well. You know, there's a lot of defenders that, and Upamecano is another great example. I'm not saying that he's on their level physically and talent wise, but that mental one is a difficult one to change. And I feel like that's where Arteta, if he were to come back, Arteta would have to put in real work, or he would have to hope that on loan, that work has been put in. So I think the chances of that happening, you know, are real low, generally speaking, because there's a lot of things that have to, like, the stars kind of have to align that, you know, on loan, he's learned what he needs to learn. He'd have to come back into the team, and he'd be starting from a different position to Saliba in terms of where he's at in the fans' mindset and in the manager's mindset, because Saliba didn't even touch ball for us, right? So we weren't like, oh, he needs to be much better than he was before. With Tavares, he's kind of like, he's got negative stock at our club at this point. So he'd have to come back and really have turned everything around. And, you know, maybe, I don't know, like with the Xhaka redemption arc, maybe it's possible, but I don't see it happening, man. I'm unfortunately, I like Tavares. He looks like he could be a good player, but I just think it's a difficult one to try turn that ship around.
No, I think it's a possibility, but I think the main reason is obviously he's your player, so you wouldn't have to pay a fee for him or anything. Obviously, the other reason he's still young, so he can still turn it around. It's not like he's, you know, a complete write-off in terms of his age and his progression. And also, he's been at Marseille. He's been playing quite high-level football. That's obviously where Saliba was playing before he came back from loan as well. So there's a few things around it. But I agree that probably the most likely solution is you buy Castagna, which obviously we talked about last week. The rumours have got stronger. He can cover left and right, and then you're probably covered like that. But you never know. He might be given some time. And to be honest, as 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 hard as it was to watch him do some of those bozo-y type things when he was playing for you, I kind of felt bad for him. And I felt like, I agree with you, he has a lot of the attributes to be a good player. And it was just a case of maybe needing to work with him a bit more on the mental, on that kind of side to prepare him for football, especially when he was going into FA Cup ties, you know, away at the City ground. Obviously, they weren't Prem team at the time. Notts Forest were in the Championship, and maybe he wasn't ready for some of those things, and he wasn't prepared. So I would personally, obviously, I'm not an Arsenal fan, but just as a football fan who watches and sees someone go through a bit of a tough time, getting hooked. I think he got hooked twice, didn't he? Once at halftime and once before halftime. That's not nice, and for a young player, that's really not nice. So, you know, I would personally be quite happy if he got, you know, a run and did quite well, because, you know, that would be great. That would be, even part of me who's, you know, ripped shreds out of Xhaka when he's done stupid stuff before. I quite liked seeing him have this comeback, you know, and still he does bozo stuff, and I get it. We can make fun of him. But, you know, that's one of the romances and beautiful things about sport and football in particular, that, you know, you can have these Paul Gascoigne type comebacks where he's, you know, down and out and then comes back.
Well, I agree with you. I do like a redemption arc. Everyone likes a redemption arc, right? Particularly if it's your player. But I'm going to ask you, right? Like, I've complained a lot about holding and you know, having these liabilities at the back. If we want to be a Prem winning team, is that the right way to go? Like, of course, I would love to see it. I would love to see Tavares come in and bang it and be really good and all that. But does that show intention to be a Prem winning team, to bring back someone that, I know it sounds illogical, but to bring back someone that hasn't been great for us when he has played for us? He would be back up again because he's not going to be starting, so he's not going to get regular football for us to be able to see, like, oh, actually, he's much better now. So he's going to be starting behind Zinchenko, and he's going to have to rely on just performing really, really well when he gets his opportunity. And to me, that just screams of a Rob Holding type situation, where it's just like, we don't trust you. You've only got a couple of opportunities to come in and make sure that we do trust you. And the likelihood is that you're not going to be able to do it. You're not going to be able to do enough to get us to believe in you now, to be able to do it, and to let us have faith that we can go and win the league or win whatever else. So to me, that I feel like that would show intention that we're still not ready to be a Prem winning team.
Yeah, no, I do hear you. That's a good point. Maybe the conditions for Saliba to come and get reintegrated into the team were different last season than they would be this season for you to kind of mirror that same kind of situation. So that's a good point, man. To To be fair, I hear that, but still, I could still see him come in. I don't necessarily think he was as bad as a Holding, even when he was having some of his clangers. So I still feel like you could have him in if you've got a Castagna as well, and then you've got some depth. Like he's going to add positively to depth, so it wouldn't be a case of having him in as being, he's definitely doesn't. I don't think you should put all his eggs in his basket as replacing Tierney, and that's your solution. But I think with Castagna as another cover as well, I think that would be good cover in that position, and I feel like it would be something that you could try out. If it doesn't work out,
Yeah,
go into January,
if we
sell
purchase
him,
someone
or do something.
else, then fine, I'm cool with that. I'm just saying if we lose Tierney and we're replacing that with Tavares, like again, I'm thinking FM squad planner here. That's not plan A, right? You lose a
Yeah,
good
fair enough.
backup, and you get. He might be good now, but he wasn't good for us last time. So if we get Castagna as well, then yeah, bring him back. But again, that gets to the issue of playing first team football at Marseille, come back to Arsenal and be third string. Maybe not a lot of players are going to do that when we haven't won the league. We haven't won anything yet, right? So it's
True.
that one's a difficult one as well.
But you never know. I might be completely off the mark too, because maybe we only saw a glimpse of his character in that documentary. Maybe he's been a troublemaker, or maybe he's got other issues that are preventing him from being even reintegrated in the first place. So let's see. Let's move on to the United outgoings. And honestly, I had to look at my phone, a good 4 or 5 times, make sure I was seeing the right things and I wasn't just like hallucinating or something when I saw these rumours of Maguire to Spurs, because honestly, I don't really dream about football. As much as we chat about football pretty much 24/7, I never dream about it. But the only dream I've ever had is Harry Maguire to leave Man United, and that's no disrespect to him as a person, because I don't really know him, but as a footballer, it's probably the worst transfer in our history. And I'm probably being quite kind to say probably. He definitely is the worst transfer in our history. And I don't think it's all his fault, because I think there's circumstances around it. Obviously the management, uncertainty around, for example, even the ownership now, really bad decision making done above him, which has contributed to kind of a bit of the show that's gone on at our club in the last 5-6 years. But I'm praying, I'm crossing all my fingers, all my thumbs, my toes. I've got a bit of a hurt toe, by the way, right now. But if I could cross it, I'd cross that as well. And it would be quite hilarious if he went to Spurs, because Spurs are absolutely mudded. I've got nothing against them, live in the local area, but it's obviously quite funny to laugh at Spurs. If they got Maguire, a back line of Longley, Dyer and Maguire, I know they're going to probably get a new goalie, but if they just kept Lloris for a bit longer as well, put him in goal, oh my God, they could have a relegation battle. But I don't want to say that now, because if they might be listening, obviously that's a super low chance, but they need to get Maguire. But yeah, I might be quite hopeful. That might be one of those, fake Fabrizio type things where it's all a bit of a hoax. But I'm crossing my fingers, like I said, praying that he's going to go to Spurs, because that would be, number one, it would save us a bunch of money, because I think he's probably on like 200k or something like that. I heard rumours of us actually having to pay him off to leave as well. Something about a £10 million loyalty bonus. If he leaves the club, we'd have to pay him. So it's a big hit financially, but I would take it personally. And I think the majority of United fans would take it. I think a lot of the rival fans, if they stopped laughing and hoping that we kept him because he's so rubbish, they would also think that that's a sound decision. But yeah, I'm really hoping. When I see all these rumours, I don't really get invested most of the time. Obviously, I really want Harry Kane, but apart from that, all the other ones are kind of a bit agnostic to it. But this one is one of those ones that I'm like, Harry Kane, maybe we could buy Harry Kane and give him like 30-40 million plus Maguire. I don't know. That would be perfect. Why don't we just 2 birds with 1 stone? But yeah, I'm hoping and praying. But what's your opinion on that, John? Do you think it's a transfer we should do? Do you think we should keep him just for jokes? What do you think?
Well, I mean, like, from a competitive standpoint, yeah, I hope you keep him, because he's shocking and he makes you worse. And I just love seeing him go up I don't like seeing you guys in trophy finals and stuff like that, or going up to collect trophies. I just love the fact that he comes off the bench every single time. He's up there with Bruno, getting his hands on the trophy while doing absolutely nothing and actually impacting your campaigns negatively. That gets me, and I crack up every single time. So selfishly, I'd love to see you keep him. I'd like to see you keep him and play him every single week. It would be absolutely world class. But I think Ten Hag's a bit too smart for that one. I mean, on the Spurs thing, I'm just like you said, right? That would be, and I love that this term has become like a thing now. But that would be such a Spursy defense, wouldn't it? To see Eric Dyer, Longley, and Maguire with Pedro Porro, who can't defend on the right, or on one side. Oh Lord! And then you would have Lloris in goal. That would be. I don't know what Ange Postecoglou would be thinking there, but that would be the funniest and probably the best thing I've ever seen. That would be a real Bolton type defense. All they need now is Kevin Davis up top, and they'd be absolutely in that Bolton level of competition. So I would love to see that. And I think the only other thing I'm going to say is I've heard that Kane was asking for Maguire. And if that is true, there is no wonder Kane has never won a trophy. If he is that bad at picking who he wants to be, I hope to God he never gets into management. If he wants Harry Maguire to be his rock at the back, then there's something wrong with him. And no wonder he's never won a trophy, because if that's true, that is shocking. Because he's honestly, maybe for England, he's better. And maybe that's why Kane's thinking that. But good Lord, you have to be out of your absolute mind to want him in this day and age in your team.
No, you're making me crack up so hard on that, because it's you you dropped so many subliminals as well. You think you're slick. You're out here saying Angie Postecoglou. Oh, that was killing me. Big Angie. But nah, I mean, Dyer, Maguire, it rhymes, just for bants as well, keep them going. But yeah, they're not going to keep Lloris. I would be absolutely shocked, in, again, like I said, a positive way, if they did get Maguire from us, just because he might not want to leave. He's in a nice cushy salary. He gets, like you said, he gets to run out and stretch his legs for 5 minutes at the end of cup finals and lift a trophy, not doing any work. He gets to run on every now and again, grab the captain's armband from Bruno and, pretend like he's a captain for 5-10 minutes at the end of a game, or when we're trying to, see out a 1-0 win or something like that. So he's living a decent life, I'd probably say. And I don't know if he's got the minerals or the, cojones again for the third time of the ep to actually say, I want to go out and play first team football. So I think the actual real deciding factor on this might be what Gareth Southgate thinks of his current season, not really playing that much. And I know he cares, about playing for England for a lot. And he actually plays decent for them, and the system actually suits him. So I can understand why he'd prefer to play for them. But, unless Southgate says, look, Harry, you need to be wearing your kit and actually playing football first team in this next season. Otherwise, I'm not taking you to the next Euros. I think he might stay, which honestly, I think is a big mistake for him. I think it's a big mistake for us. Like, we need to get a better centre-back in to be able to create more competition and fill in when, Varane, who's quite injury-prone, or if you see, for example, Martinez gets a big injury in the season or is out for a few weeks. Lindelof's looked great, mate. I have to be honest. I've been one of his biggest skeptics throughout his time at United. He's looked rubbish at times. But now, seeing him play with Varane and when he played with Martinez, I'm now thinking that's got to be Maguire tax as well. And I'm going to put that on Maguire as well. Sorry, mate. You're getting absolute pummeling in this episode, Harry. But you have the ability to make everyone look around you, which I don't know if is a skill or a curse. Probably both. But the majority of the, clangers that we've had, bar De Gea, letting one roll through his arms or doing an absolute madness, you can actually point the fingers at Maguire most of the time. And unfortunately, other players around him at that time caught some strays because they were there. and they weren't able to prevent it. But Lindelof's a great example of actually we've been unfair to him. He's a decent to good centre back, certainly good enough to be a backup and step in, and you don't see a major drop in performance. But we need to free up that space. And we've talked about it previously. I'd love for a young centre back to come in there, a Timber. You showed me that link to the young Monaco centre back, Disasi, I think his name is. I'll be happy with them. It's not that I hate Kim Min Jae. Look, I've got Park Ji Sung on my wall. Like, I love Koreans. Get them in. More Asians, the better. But I just think that fourth to third role would fit a younger up and coming centre back to fit in and almost have like a kind of defensive Garnacho impact rather than, an actual first teamer like Kim Min Jae. Because honestly, if Kim Min Jae comes in, you'd think Varane's got a whole bench. And I think Varane has been one of our best defenders this season and has flown under the radar. And I think he deserves to be first choice alongside Sandro Martinez. I think as a partnership, they've been great. I think a lot of the terrible performances have been a bit on De Gea, a bit on other players who've kind of made them look terrible or exposed them and allowed other teams to make them look a little bit weak. So I would hope that Maguire goes. Be beautiful if he goes to Spurs for all those subliminal shot reasons that you put in just now, but it would also free up that spot. And I won't be angry if we get Kim Min Jae. I think he's class. But I would prefer us to go for a younger centre back, and I think that's the best route forward.
Yeah, I mean, I agree on that because I think, I've said it from the very beginning. Like when you rate anyone in a defence, you have to take into account who they're surrounded by, because I feel like they're way more affected by the players around them than anyone else in a team, whether it's a midfielder or an attacker. So like we've said it many times before, but like Varane was never terrible. Your Luke Shaw looks like he was never terrible. Like Delo, never terrible. All of these players were never terrible until they got into a situation where they had to consistently have to clean up for someone else. And I think they had to clean up on such a consistent, regular basis, and they were having to clean up absolute clangers and shockers from being around him, that they couldn't just shoulder all that responsibility themselves. So they end up looking horrible as well. And I think the best way I can say it is, those like feel good Instagram pages, right? Where, like a basketball team or a football team, they have like a kit man that's retiring. And they're like, all right, for the last game of the season, we're going to let you come on for 5 minutes and, the opposition will let you come on and score a goal or score a bucket. That's what it feels like when Maguire gets on the pitch. It feels like it feels like charity to me. When you're letting him get time, it feels like charity. It feels like, okay, this geezer's retiring. He's going to go and live on a boat for a couple of years. Let's get him on for 5 minutes and give him a clap at, give him a standing ovation. And so I think you need to do everything within your power to get rid of that guy, because every day you keep him in, every minute he plays on the pitch, it makes all of those players around him less confident, lower morale by playing with him. So I agree with you. I think if you're going to get Kim Min Jae as well, he has to play. If you're coming from like a Napoli team, like probably the high that he's on from what happened for Napoli, I think he's going to want to play. And like you said, I think Varane deserves to continue to start. So I wouldn't want to see you buy Kim Min Jae and then kind of kill this up that he's on by not playing him, or kill Varane's up by not playing him. So I feel like it just makes more sense, generally speaking, to let him go somewhere else. And as you say, go and get a young CB. And I think there are a couple on the market that you could get that look decent.
No, I agree with you. But beyond that, I'm just not sure stylistically if Kim Min Jae would be a better fit than Varane. Because if you think about physicality, you talked about it on the last pod. Varane is actually surprisingly quite strong, and he's definitely developed, I think, also a little bit more since he's been at United in terms of working on his physicality and his strength, because he realizes the English game has got hasn't got your Kevin Davies like you mentioned earlier, maybe as years gone by, but you still got to be more physical. So, but the thing he has got and he's always had is pace. So that recovery pace is really useful for us, and it will probably be more and more useful going forward as our style of play kind of changes a little bit and fits more of what Ten Hag looking to do. And I'll admit I haven't seen enough of Kim Min Jae to say definitively that he doesn't have that kind of pace. But from what I've seen of him, he's not slow. He's not Maguire levels, or he's not Per Mertesacker levels from the years gone by. But he's probably not as fast as Varane. So I think stylistically, him and Lissandro probably wouldn't fit as well as Varane would. And I think if you look at a Timber or a Disasi or someone younger like that, they've probably got more of Varane's attributes and could be molded into kind of his successor in the long run. So, yeah, I think that's the best way forward. And yeah, I'm gonna cross these bad boys until I see that Fabrizio. Here we go, Maguire, and I'll take him going anywhere. But it would be hilarious if he went to Spurs. No offense to any of my Spurs mates, but yeah, that's I think that's probably where we're going to wrap it up, Johns, for this week's pod. We ran longer than we were going to. So yeah, we just can't get it below an hour, even if we try. But yeah, make sure to follow and leave a review if you're listening to us on any of the audio platforms. We're on Spotify, Apple, Google, also Amazon recently as well. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, share if you want, and try and get our viewership up if possible. And yeah, let us know if we've had some shocking takes, because I know there's a lot of opinions out around about this treble winning side, about the Invincibles, probably even about the transfers, probably less so Tierney, because like you said, it's a bit of circumstance with him. But I know there were some mates of mine who were leaving comments on our socials asking for us to talk about Maguire, and we just had to find a moment where it actually made sense and it was topical and not just us piling on. So yeah, make sure you interact with the podcast as much as possible. And yeah, we'll see you next week. Cheers, Johns.
Cheers, Ant.